Doesn't make sense.
Just saying, very
As you can see, it is a real celebration when you cannot get the guests, the speakers, the organizers to sit because they're too excited to see each other, to catch up. And so it feels very, very special today to be with you in one room to celebrate 50 years of the Copernicus Endowment, or the Copernicus Center for Polish Studies. My name is Geneviève Zubrzicki. I'm director of the Copernicus Center for Polish Studies. And for me, it's very meaningful to see alums, people that I just crossed with when I was arriving as an assistant professor, and we overlapped for a few months, colleagues with whom I've been working for several years, and also members of the Polish community who are constant presence at all of our events. So I'm very moved to see people who are from Ann Arbor, from Detroit, from Poland, from Canada, at least one, two from Canada, and to welcome you for this very joyous affair. And you can feel it in the room, and I look forward to the panels, the reception as well, where we can exchange. And so now I will go to a more formal introduction because I've written things. I want to make sure that I did not forget anything. So I will put my glasses on. And start again by welcoming our students, faculty, alum, and those close friends from near and far. It's an honor to welcome you today to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Polish Studies at Michigan. The Copernicus Center has been a shining example of what a dedicated group of individuals and an institution can achieve when they come together in the pursuit of knowledge. In 1973, a small group of faculty, students, and Polish Americans came together with a shared vision and aspirations for Polish programming at the University of Michigan. Peter Ostafin, the father of Marisha and Lisa Ostafin, was among them. A professor of sociology and administrator at the University of Michigan, he led the initiative for many years, and Marisha later carried the torch, working closely with faculty directors like myself, and before me with professors Brian Porter-Szűcs, Michael Kennedy in the back, and Roman Sportluk before he went to Harvard. The Copernicus Endowment's founders' foresight and determination have paved the way for 50 years of pioneering work advancing the knowledge and understanding of the people, culture, and politics of Poland. Our unwavering commitment to our students, as well as groundbreaking programming, led to the Copernicus Endowment's recognition by the university as a program, first as a program in 2014, and then to our elevation as a full-fledged center in 2019. This institutional recognition has in turn allowed us to develop new programs in collaboration with different partners on campus and beyond. The close collaborations with numerous educational institutions in Poland, as well as with cultural organizations such as the Adam Mickiewicz Institute and the Polin Museum of the History of Polish Jews in Warsaw, the Galicia Museum in Kraków, or the Tatra Museum in Zakopane, are enduring reminders of this impact. Our golden anniversary is a testament to the half-century-long commitment to promoting knowledge about Poland. The center has consistently supported research, scholarship, and educational programs that promote a deeper understanding of Poland. Students at Michigan can enroll in courses on politics, culture, history, in language courses, literature, and film. In fact, CCPS, or the Copernicus Center for Polish Studies, offers more Poland-related programs than any other educational institutions in North America. And this is quite an achievement. And actually, when preparing our commemorative booklet here, A booklet, by the way, who was designed by Mike Savitsky, who is here in the back. He does amazing design. Every year he does also our Copernicana. But when we were working this summer, the staff, Małgosia Kowalczyk, myself, Rachel Brichta, Marisha Ostefin, we were going through tons and tons of photographs from past programming, and it is just unbelievable, actually, the riches. So I want to say a few words about that too. The incredible guest speakers we hosted and the events we organized. We hosted Kołakowski, Miłosz, Baranczak, Penderecki, Górecki, Stańko, Michnik, Brzeziński, Jedlicki, Wodyczko, Kora, Holland, Tuszyńska, Masłowska, Hoffman, Biedroń, Nowacka, Pełczyńska-Nałęcz. And we also hosted 2 former presidents, Aleksander Kwaśniewski a couple times, Lech Wałęsa last year, and 1 future president, Lech Kaczyński, during the 10th year anniversary of the Roundtable. Marisha Ostefin, Piotr Michałowski, Michael Kennedy, Bogdana Carpenter, and Joseph Blas received the Polish Gold Cross of Merit for organizing a unique conference, that conference on the 10th anniversary of the Roundtable Agreements, which included participants of that historic event. Participants, I must say, also, that might refuse to meet in Poland, and indeed refuse to meet each other in Poland, but agreed to discuss Poland's negotiated transition from communism here in Ann Arbor. The conference was unprecedented, and the materials from the conference, recordings and transcripts, constitute a unique archive that scholars can now study. So not only the Roundtable Agreement was historic, but the 10-year anniversary conference we hosted here in Ann Arbor was also unique and historic, and constitute important materials for understanding the event and its aftermath. We organized other conferences more recently. I remember a committee of ours led by Brian Porter-Szűcs. We organized one on Polish studies. Then we organized another one on Polish Jewish scholarship, which brought to Ann Arbor scholars from North America, Poland, and Israel. Our students attend all of those important lectures, films, and events, and it definitely enriches their studies. We also send them on internships to Poland, and many of them enroll in summer courses too. So one was taught by Brian Porter-Szűcs and Zvi Kittelman. Is Zvi here today? Yes, in the back. Zvi, welcome.
And Anya as well.
And Anya Cichopek. So the Copernicus Center for Polish Studies has played a vital role in nurturing the next generation of scholars on Poland. With outstanding faculty in several fields, we, as a university, attract some of the very best students from Poland and the US who are preparing for careers in academia, government, law, and business. We will soon hear several of them, several of our alums, and we're thrilled to have current students also in the room with us today. We're also thrilled to provide Polish scholars with opportunities to conduct and share their research at the University of Michigan, thanks to a generous gift from Diane Widziński, a longtime team member. Diane, it's an honor for me to thank you publicly today on behalf of all students and scholars who will benefit from the Widziński Fellowship. My deepest gratitude goes to all those who have supported the Copernicus Center for Polish Studies over the years, faculty, staff, students, alumni, community members, and benefactors. I look forward to the next 50 years of this remarkable journey, and I'm confident that CCPS will continue to challenge us and foster our understanding of Poland for generations to come. So thank you, everyone, for being here and celebrating with us this important anniversary. And before I give the floor to Brian Porter-Szűcs, I will say a few words about him. So, Brian Porter-Szűcs is the Thurnau Professor and Professor of History at the University of Michigan, where he has taught since 1994. He served as director of the Copernicus Endowment from 2000 till 2010. His work includes Poland and the Modern World, Beyond Martyrdom, Faith and Beyond Martyrdom, Faith and Fatherland, Catholicism, Modernity in Poland, as well as When Nationalism Began to Hate, Imagining Modern Politics in 19th Century Poland. And a remarkable thing is that all three of those monographs were translated into Polish, and the last two have made a strong impact in the field of Polish history, and even broader. We keep hearing from people outside of academia about how transformative reading Brian's work has been in their understanding of Polish history. So without any further, please join me in welcoming Brian and our speakers today.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Genevieve. I'm so delighted to be here, and really, I just want to make sure, and I'm sure we'll have occasion as the evening progresses, but to really thank Genevieve deeply for the fact that we are celebrating not just we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of Polish Studies at Michigan, but we're doing it in the Polish Studies Center. And that is Genevieve's doing, and deserves our thanks for that. After Roman Sporlik, Mike Kennedy, and myself, we finally got somebody in this job running this thing who actually knows how to manage a bureaucracy, and could get us promoted. So it's my real pleasure to be able to introduce this panel of friends and colleagues that I suspect probably everybody already knows, but I'll go through the formalities anyway. Just going in alphabetical order, we start with Anna Cichopek. You know, I never know how to pronounce the second part of your last name. It's kind of like the second part of my last name, I guess. How is it pronounced? Gajraj. Anna Cichopek-Gajraj.
Stefan King.
Okay. Much more interesting than Szűcs, which just means furrier. Anya researches Polish-Jewish relations, anti-Semitism, and ethnic violence in Poland, and the Polish-Jewish diaspora after the Holocaust. Her book, Beyond Violence, Jewish Survivors in Poland and Slovakia, 1944 to 1948, came out in 2014 to much acclaim. It was a finalist for the 2016 Jordan Schnitzer Book Award, and a recipient of the 2015 Barbara Helt Prize, which is a very major award from ACES. Also the author of Pogrom Żydów w Krakowie, 11 sierpnia, 1945 roku, which came out in 2000 and played a huge role in getting her admitted into our program. Really was like, I think, the first book to really talk about that very important event in Polish history. Recipient also of the 2016 Shofar Zahor Award for exhibiting and carrying the work of Holocaust education, Holocaust remembrance, and community interaction. Currently, Anya is Associate Professor of History at Arizona State. Next, again, going in alphabetical order, is Paulina Duda, who...
the current daughter of the president? No.
No, yes, no relation. No. Okay. Yes, we won't talk about the last name.
Exactly.
Yeah. Graduated from our program in 2017. Currently a visiting assistant professor at Brown University, and an assistant professor at the Polish-Japanese Academy of Information Technology. Like I say, received her degree here in 2017, MA from University College London, BA from Jagiellonian, works on film studies specifically. Next, next we have somebody who can remember a time before I got here.
That's why you invited me, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it had to be. I was afraid I'd be the one with the.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I shouldn't have said that. It's Keely Stauter-Halsted, and Keely got her PhD here in '93, Professor of History, and Stefan and Lucy Hejna, Family Chair in the History of Poland at the University of Illinois at Chicago. The author of several really outstanding and field-defining books. First book was The Nation in the Village, The Genesis of Rural National Identity in Austrian Poland. Came out back in 2001 and won the Orbis Prize in Polish history. Then a really excellent, outstanding book, The Devil's Chain, Prostitution and Social Control in Partition Poland, came out in 2015. That received also received the Health Prize, actually, and also the American Historical Association's Joan Kelly Prize in history. Earlier, an edited collection with Nancy Wingfield, Sexual Deviance and Social Control in Late Imperial Eastern Europe. It's a great collection. And a work I'm really looking forward to, work in progress, How to End an Empire, Population Management and the Redefinition of Citizenship in the Polish Second Republic. Coming out soon. Maybe I shouldn't jinx it and say
Coming
soon.
out.
And finally, but purely alphabetically finally, Ewa Wampuszyc, PhD in Slavic, 2004, MA here as well in '96. Ewa is Content Review Manager at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. Also the author of a really excellent book, came out in 2018, called Mapping Warsaw, The Spatial Poetics of a Post-War City. Ewa has taught Polish Studies at the University of Florida and at UNC Chapel Hill. Has also a forthcoming book, which is I'm so pleased to see is coming out in English. Translation of Joanna Tokarska-Bakir's Cursed, A Social Portrait of the Kielce Pogrom. So the title of our gathering here is supposed to be Polish Studies Then and Now. I'm pleased that it's not then, now, and in the future, because the future is going to be harder to talk about, although I think some of my questions are going to lead in that direction. I'd like to ask first, just to get started, what is this thing we do? How do you delineate or define Polish studies as a field of inquiry? Why don't we just stick with the alphabetical order? Start with.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's so wonderful to be here. Can I just say, I should say I'm happy to be here, but I'm actually terrified to be here. It's like coming back to my grad school. But seriously, thank you so much for this invitation. I'm really happy to be here. And I probably would not be in my professional life where I am today without all of you here. Brian, Svi, Genevieve, Michael, Marisha, this has been such a wonderful home. So thank you and congratulations on this fabulous anniversary to all of you. So when and we received the questions ahead of time.
Oh, you weren't supposed to give that away.
So I must admit I was baffled. My first thought was, I don't know anything about Polish studies and I have nothing to say. And I'm a historian after all. And then I thought, okay, well, I am a historian of Polish history, so probably I'm part of Polish studies, or am I part of Polish studies? So that might be actually telling about the tension between our disciplinary training and where we feel at home, usually, which is our disciplines, and what Polish studies is. And for the last 22 years that I've been professionally active, I came to grad school, then got the job, and I never thought of myself as part of Polish studies. I never thought I belonged to Polish studies. I always thought, and I know that places like Indiana Polish Studies Center, like this beautiful center, should be multidisciplinary and are multidisciplinary. But as a historian, I never felt, I guess I always associated Polish studies with literature and the Polish language. And I think this invitation made me rethink and show my ignorance that I might have been completely wrong what Polish studies are. So this is my very, very kind of non-answer to the question about Polish studies, what it is. I guess what Polish studies, the second part of Polish studies, means that it should be multidisciplinary. More in practice, it is in theory, but it should be perhaps more inviting to historians. And as for the first part of the Polish studies concept, of course, coming from 20th century Polish Jewish history, for me, that Polishness was always a very broad concept, right? That it's not ethnic Polish Catholic, but broad, including, of course, Jews. And again, kind of Polish studies felt for a long time somewhat alienating in that sense, that this is more about, for example, Polish American studies. For years and years, when I looked at the work coming out from Polish American studies, I saw it as being more interested and focused on Catholic diaspora, ethnic Polish diaspora in the US. And now recently I joined my wonderful colleagues in Polish American Studies Association. And they joined me to actually maybe broaden Polish American Studies to include Polish Jewish diaspora in the US, which is not always obvious. For me, it's obvious that it's part of that field, but maybe it's a trajectory now that we are seeing. I was actually thinking the other day whether Yiddish could be a part of Polish studies, but right, to what extent the language defines the field, I don't know. Thank you.
So, yeah, we go alphabetically.
Unlike Anya, I have always felt 150% belonging to the Polish studies. Like there was never doubt about it. Paulina from Poland doing Polish studies. It was easy to remember, easy to associate me with Polish studies. And also because my trajectory was really like starting from the Polish philology in the Jagiellonian, then going to England to do MA degree in Russian, but still mostly Polish studies. And then finally landing here, still continuing like Polish studies. However, I think what Anya said made me think I think when I think about Polish studies, I would say it's really what 1, 2, and if you are lucky, and if you are at University of Michigan, 3 or 4 or 5 faculty members are willing and able to teach. So I do see this interdisciplinary dialogue really happening simply because if I am running the Polish program, I teach language, I teach literature, I teach cinema, I can do it effectively only with the help of faculty members coming from different disciplines. So here we were so lucky to have, professors in sociology, history, comparative literature, cinema studies. Smaller universities are not that privileged, so I think the only way to really make sure that Polish studies exist is to try to reach out to other departments beyond the Slavic. I think Slavic and the language study, literature will always be like the heart. That's supposed to be like almost the place that brings the community in, but without the help of like different specialists in the field, I don't think it's will be like really possible to make this work. So yeah, so usually we have historians doing Central European studies. The matter is to like convince them like how can we do it together to kind of create the program. So I am at Brown now, and I'm lucky to. So Michael Kennedy now is there, so I'm trying to take advantage of him being there. I always use my context that I actually developed here, because that is the heart of the Polish studies. As you said, it's so true when I think about where is the best place to do Polish studies in the United States, it's here. Yeah. So, but it's like interdisciplinary with the heart in the Slavic, I would say, just to advance my own agenda.
Okay, well, we'll have to think about that.
So you historians without us, I don't think you can.
Okay, so to a historian then.
All right. See if I can work the difference here.
Okay.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. It is very weird and unnerving to be back. This is my third Polish Studies Center. I began life as a Polish historian in Lane Hall on the other side of campus when Roman Szparlik and Marisha were running the show, and then it was Svi, and then there's been several iterations of, and I think that we were in the shadow of Russian and Soviet stuff for a long time. Now it feels like it's mushroomed into its own thing, and just seeing the vibrancy of the office here and the number of projects and people doing things is really heartening. So it's fun to be back for that reason, although it's just a different space. I thought about this question and was baffled initially when we got the possible questions that might be asked of us. And I took it as something that you, Brian, have dealt with in your work, which is basically, where is Poland, who is Polish? What is the subject matter in terms of humans and groups and even territory that we address? Yes, we need language, but I think it's languages. I mean, there are multiple languages spoken and that have been spoken in the Polish space over the centuries. And I think that the whole kind of sociological question of who is a Pole has been asked in our field and in the space that is Poland for centuries, right? There was a time when peasants weren't Poles. There certainly have been times, even up till today, when Jews weren't considered Poles. Is a Ruthenian or a Ukrainian part of Poland, and if so, how do they perform that? How do they connect with these different identities? So I think that it's almost like the vitality and the energy of our studies comes from perennially asking this question over and over again. Who's in, who's out? How do we frame it? How do these different groups interact? And how do we talk about the Polish space, which you call Northeastern Europe, and that's one thing, that's one way to do it, but it really is, even if we can't nail it, there is a space where Polishness has had an impact, where Polish players, Polish leaders have thought as theirs, even if it was in the colonial way. And so how have various groups interacted, intersected, identified, if you will, with that? So I think that basically it's a question that's asked constantly and can even be asked today concerning refugees and migrants and mobile populations. How do they fit into what Poland is or what Polishness might be, and how do people on the ground interact with these, how do people in stable positions interact with mobile populations? So I think it's a moving target, and I think that yes, language, but also yes, Polish language, but also Yiddish, Ukrainian, all these other things in the Polish area, and we need to keep asking the question, right? And that's part of the joy of this kind of a program.
So I have
what's left.
I'm like not much left to say at this point, but that's both the benefit and the curse of being at the end of the alphabet. But first off, I do want to thank Genevieve for the invitation, for really keeping the torch lit throughout the decades to all of you who are here. And one person who's not here, we should mention Bogdana Carpenter, who was always really the spearheaded Polish and fought for Polish on the administrative level for decades, right? Yeah. So we would be, I think, remiss if we missed that touch point. I also just want to do a quick caveat that I am here in my museum capacity, but anything that I say is my personal opinion. Right? So that's, I was asked to make sure to mention that. But to move into this question of Polish studies, in a way, all of you have said things that are already in my notes, and at the same time, we each have very different experiences. And like Paulina, I always felt very much in Polish studies. And in the opposite direction of Ania, moved from a very Polish studies focus towards expanding that towards Polish-Jewish, intersection of Polish-Jewish history within the Polish lands, right? And so there's a way which what you said about Polish studies very much is the upside down cake of my own experience, right? I came to Michigan in the early 90s and I started in CREASE, in Russian and East European studies. And what that meant was Polish studies in a solidly interdisciplinary context. And I did seek out, of course, Michael's there shaking his head, classes with Michael, Brian had arrived. We had faculty across the board teaching Polish studies. We had the business school involvement. We had the Davidson Center, which I participated in. Marian Krzyżowski started those programs early in the 90s. And for me, that very beginning was in contrast to Keely's experience, which was under the yoke of the Soviet time. This was a time when we were coming out of that, right? And this was a time of opportunity, and that is what has very much shaped my experience and my perspective on Polish studies. And we've all talked about this as an interdisciplinary field, but I do think that that is the result of many, many factors. It has to do with changes in history in the 90s. It has to do with university structures and precisely what Paulina was saying, having to have faculty spread across many departments. Polish does not have the benefit of something like Russian or German. You look at German studies departments and you have people who specialize in a 50-year period, right? You have, in terms of Slavic, you have Russianists who are doing a century.
Or an author.
Or an author, right? What did we have to do in this Slavic context, and Paulina knows this very well, we have to jump through everything. First year Polish, second year Polish, third year Polish, fourth year Polish, medieval literature, et cetera, right? And so in order to be able to do that and still maintain the field within a very challenging campus environment, Polish studies for me became what do we need to teach our students the basics of what those various manifestations of Poland and Polishness, right? And that required both in terms of research and in terms of program building, and will continue, I would argue, to require a tremendous amount of flexibility that crosses disciplines, right? And that's, I think, how I would maybe summarize my own experience and what my colleagues here have said.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, so there is a Polish Studies Association, currently presided over by, oh, no, you're not?
I passed the torch.
You passed it, who has it now?
Jan Musekamp and Karolina Mechu.
Ah, okay.
The Germanists have taken over.
The Germanists have taken over. Well, that tells you something. I don't know if this is still true, but when I was organizing that, the biggest single discipline represented in the Polish Studies Association was historians. So, sorry.
But then, once you want to have students going and actually doing research, they come to us to do the language, to the culture, right?
Shall we compare enrollments? It's obviously, it's got to be interdisciplinary. It's got to be all of us, I think. But it does strike me, listening to your answers, that it is both, right? It is the study of the Polish language and all those who speak it, but it is also the study of a group of people in a certain space without clear borders, that regardless of what language they're speaking. And that includes the Germans, so fine if they're running things now. That's not a sentence I thought I'd ever say. So let's just collapse. So each of you entered the field at a different moment. All of us entered the field at different moments. And I'm curious how you think the field, however you define it, has changed from then until now. Why don't we start with you, Keely?
I have the most trajectory to analyze. Oof, it has changed so much. So here's what I would say. Firstly, Poland itself and Polishness are, I would say, much less sort of ghettoized than they were when I began in this universe in the late 80s, in the sense that people doing work in the Polish space or on Polish topics or in Poland are in conversation with folks, scholars and academics in Western Europe, with people in North America. And it's no longer the case that we think that, I don't know, that Poland is sort of exotic because they have this solidarity thing and they have this anti-communist movement and they have, sadly, we're kind of all on the same page in some of these contemporary battles that are being fought. But what that means is that we can have conversations, we can have actual dialogue with people there and here, and there's a sort of a synergy of work and ideas and the way that things come together on all sorts of matters. So Poles are researching racism and they're researching anti-Semitism just like we are, and they're involved in issues of what is right-wing populism and where does it come from and what do we do about it. All of that stuff is, you know, it's a kind of a level playing field in terms of the contact and the mutual influence or cross-fertilization. So that's been one of the biggest changes that I have experienced. I will also say that for the most part, it's tremendously easier to get access to archival material and to travel to Poland, to come and go from Poland. The only exception to that is maybe the Institute for National Memory, which seems to kind of control certain documents. So there are still ways in which it's not completely free, but the degree to which the stuff is online and you can, you don't have to get permission from somebody in the Communist Party in order to enter an archive. So I feel like it's much more open and it's a common conversation. It's not us commenting on them. It's a bigger framework, and that leads to a different kind of collegiality, which I think is really wonderful. I won't tell war stories about the 1980s.
Oh, yeah. Actually, now I started off doing it chronologically. I think that means you come next.
Yeah, I think it does.
That helps date us.
That's true. So I think I would have to reinforce what Keely said. And I think about moments of change actually since I started, which was that first opening up in the 1990s, and then we have EU accession in 2004. And I'm pulling out these big, like, historical moments, but I think with that, with each moment came a resurgence of interest in the field, and both on the level of students, but also in terms of the types of questions we ask, and a retweaking of the questions we ask about this thing that we call Polish identity. And we're in yet another manifestation of that now. And these are positive developments, because I think that the continual change and the continual energy to interrogate what this means that it's alive and well in many ways. And the opening that has happened over the decades and the cross-fertilization that Keely has already mentioned, I think have been key. The reception also of scholars in America in Poland has, I think, dramatically improved as well. So it's not just that we here benefit from their work, but I do think that scholars in Poland have dramatically changed their interest or kind of their openness to things that we do and the perspectives that we bring, right? I cannot and could never introduce myself in Poland as a Polonista, right? even though I was in Slavic studies. Why? Because a Polonista in Poland has a very specific profile. They don't teach language, and they focus on a specific time period and a specific slice of culture. So my response was always Polish studies. And I think that that is something that is being more and more embraced and understood. I think some of the other positive developments have been translations, right? I work on historical translations and scholarly translations, but also literary translation. There has been a market. We have Ewa Wampuszyc here, who has translated and published along with Megan books. And we have now really a big cohort of people who provide us with quality translations. That is something that prior to the 90s and in the 90s, when you were trying to find something to teach, was in the literature culture part of Polish studies, it was very, very difficult. So that has been, I think, a huge improvement. More robust focus on the intersection and the integration of Polish studies with other studies, right? So going back to bringing in Jewish studies, bringing in regional studies, and looking at, for example, German populations in Silesia. We've had a lot of wonderful work being done on that. A negative has been the shrinking of Slavic and merging with German in other places. But that has also become fruitful in the sense that the cultural and historical connections between Poland and Germany are important, have had a huge impact on Polish history, and having those departments together in some moments has been helpful to produce research and work that crosses the philological divide in culture and moves us into a Polish-Germanic conversation about Polish identity rather than a Polish-Slavic conversation. Right? So those are, I think, some of those really productive things that have happened.
So look at us, women. Women.
Yeah, that's true too.
That's what I'm so happy in the last 10, 15 years. I don't want to. Now I will use that term. I think women dominate Polish Jewish history, and because of these, and it's my generation, older, younger, and I think we brought. Sensibilities, questions that shape our questions, right, and our approaches, our perspective. And one of the consequences is look at the everyday life history or social history, the use of ego documents. Used to be, I remember when Jan Tomasz Gross 22 years ago wrote, big call, right? Let's listen to victims and let's believe them, unless proved otherwise. Now we don't have to make that call anymore. This is the mainstream familial turn, thinking about family, childhood, childcare, local history, gender, of course, in all shapes, and of course, Keely's work, right? But this is, I think that's what women brought to the table, and I cannot be happier being in that great company. Another thing I must say, what's happening in Poland in the center of Centrum Badań nad Zagładą with Barbara Engelking in Warsaw, right? Professor Libionka, Leociak, and of course Professor Grabowski in Canada, and so many others. I think the work of the last 10 years on the Holocaust and post-Holocaust history has been absolutely this is a change of paradigm, how we think about Polish-Jewish relations during the war and after.
So the question Polish studies then and now, it's a little bit strange for me because for me it's all now.
It's all now.
Since I haven't been in that field for so long. But what Ewa said made me think how many things I take for granted. Being in the profession right now, I never even thought about like the difficulties of getting a translation of like a poetry into English, because they are there and they're wonderful translations, sometimes competing versions, so we can also teach students how to compare them. And so thank you. And also that made me think about back when I was, when Ewa Wampuszyc was my mentor and, you know, teaching me how to teach Polish as a foreign language. And she mentioned like, oh, you know, when I started, like we didn't have textbooks, like we had to make one. I was thinking like, okay. And I remember even using your textbook, because that was the thing that you passed on, and I still use it. Whereas right now I have like tons of textbooks, especially with when Russia invaded Ukraine, there's lots and lots, more and more textbooks for learners of Polish. Because it becomes targeted towards Ukrainians, but like you can still use it also in your language instruction. So that's definitely one thing that I'm taking for granted. However,
if I can interrupt you, one of the things that we all take for granted is that a stable computer font with chunky
That's right. Yes.
Because that rendition of that early textbook that Ewa and I put together was on a Mac, and when Mac changed its operating system, we lost all our fonts. So we had to redo everything. So that, I will have to say, for our profession was key.
A key development. However, when I think about like, and I would say there was like a very positive development in the Polish studies. So I turned 18 exactly the year when Poland joined the EU. So when I started college, I'm sorry, Brian. So when I started college, it was not just a matter of being a student, but I could be a student of Jagiellonian University who could benefit from Erasmus program and go to England, go to France, go to United Kingdom, and do the semester there, which was like totally, it changed the perspective of academic mobility in Poland. And I think it was really, so not only that, not only Erasmus program, but when Poland became an EU member, the institution, we became like this part of the very powerful web of European institutions, meaning that most of the Polish schools, colleges awarding you a BA degree, our degrees were recognized in the West, which meant I could finish, Polish philology at the Jagiellonian, and then I was in a very good position to apply for an MA, let's say in England, if I had enough like English proficiency. And that was really, for me, it was like, like the whole world belonged to me. That's how I felt. And I've been like monitoring this academic mobility across, not only between Poland and, other EU member states, but also between Poland and the United States. So I see that finally there is, because of course we all know Fulbright, right? That increases this, supports academic mobility and student exchange, but also on the Polish end, there is finally the awareness that if we also communicate with universities in the United States and we do some initiatives together, we fund it, it's really a beneficial endeavor, right? It makes sense to, let's say, so for example, I work in film, so I received a significant financial support from the Polish Filmmaker Association to invite speakers to Duke to give lectures related to Polish history and Polish film. So I think it's the fact that we became EU member state really opened the border physically and also metaphorically in that we started really see the point of academic exchange. Not like in just like theoretical sense, but really very physical. So I am being a scholar at a Polish university, I can apply for funds to go and let's say give a talk in England, which like, in early 21st century still the cost was so immense to go and give a talk somewhere else that most people wouldn't do. But now it's happening, and it also goes for students. So there's lots of Kościuszko Foundation comes to mind. Like there's like they really expand their academic exchange program. Now there is NAVA, the agency that really supports the mobility between students. and even smaller institutions. Like also what you do here at University of Michigan is not only about the pushing forward the field, but also giving the opportunities for students to go and be there and perhaps ideally like develop that interest further. So like the traveling became way easier in a sense that there are physical, like really financial resources that we could find to do it. So I definitely benefited from that.
That just it makes me think that I mean I remember and I'm sure Keely, you mentioned that we could share war stories about what it was like doing doctoral research in the 1980s in Poland as many challenges. Pretty interesting as well. But I remember that back then I always felt like it's good to be back in the United States. It was nice, fascinating to be in Poland. But
now I just want to go.
now every summer it's like, do I have to go back? It's this balance of the experience. Actually, thinking about exchanges leads me to my next question. There's been a lot of ways in which administratively it has become easier to have exchange programs and certainly communication with our Polish colleagues. I participate in Zoom seminars in Warsaw quite regularly, and I'm sure that we all have that experience. That is just amazing, and certainly was not possible before. But just thinking not so much as structurally, but in terms of having dialogue with our colleagues who are based in Poland. What challenges have you experienced as a scholar working on Poland in American academia, and then going over to Poland and and trying to have conversations with your disciplinary peers over there? What are the differences that you've noticed? Let's see. How about we start with Anya and then work down this way. We'll do it spatially this time.
I don't know. I don't know about challenges with communication between me and my colleagues there. I see the challenges that they face now in the last, since 2016. This is all politics and economics, right? The salaries, the cushioned jobs that we have, especially those of us who have tenure track or are tenured. We are secure, we can say whatever we want, we can write whatever we want. It's becoming much more difficult in Poland, especially when you do modern 20th century history of Poland. Frankly, I wrote a MA thesis about pogrom in Krakow in 1998, and it didn't even cross my mind not to write it. Because I knew there would be some crazy people who would say it never happened. You are a Jewish person, whatever, or Jews bought you, or. But now, if I was a junior scholar in Poland thinking about writing about pogroms, I would take a second to consider that. And I know that this is true for many graduate students, junior scholars. They think twice before taking a subject. It's a matter of funding. And of course, we have established scholars like Joanna Tokarska-Bak here, amazing scholar. She can take these kind of subjects. Professor Grabowski can take, and others. But I'm really worried about junior scholars in Poland. So I'm really fingers crossed in a week from now that this is going to change.
Yeah, I think I'll take a sort of a similar response, and that is again, if I look at it over a slightly longer trajectory, in the early years that I was a professional, done with my PhD in Poland, giving talks, it was kind of weird to talk on gender and sexuality. Mm-hmm. Like, they would come from everywhere, but they didn't know what this thing was and where it fit, and was this scholarly or was it current events, and they always wanted me to comment on, well, what are prostitutes doing today? And I'm doing the 19th century. I can't tell you anything about sex workers in modern day Warsaw. I think in a way I would, well, two things. One of the challenges is in researching Holocaust history and Jewish history, there is an aura of needing to be careful because the government has threatened. There have been laws passed. There are ways in which people are. It's not a free and open and easy thing to do research or present on, or even be the head of a museum.
Right.
But people still do it. They still do it, and it's respected. I think even more so. There is a hunger, a thirst, an interest in all of these topics. And the stuff that I was doing, especially for my second book, the gender and sexuality kinds of things, are becoming more mainstreamed. Not always with historians, but more with sociologists. But people are researching a lot of the subtopics, often about contemporary issues, like, I don't know, the history of abortion kind of now and then going backwards, or reproductive rights, or all these things that are out there in the debate in contemporary Poland, and they're kind of backing up and doing proper research on those. So there's an edginess, there's like a vitality, a really important component, because what they're doing is so consequential for the debate politically in Poland today. So yes, it's a challenge to do that, and it was hard to get funding and to find positions, but over time, people in research institutes they're getting hired to do a lot of these things. So the government doesn't actually control the Academy of Sciences or the universities. It tries, but there have been spaces opened up for this stuff. One super challenge that is really obvious, but I'll say it out loud, I have students working on Polish studies, but for the interwar period when their documents and their archives lie in Ukrainian territory. So if they are in Ukraine and they're trying to work in archives and the war comes, they have to switch topics or find some other source of material, or in Russia, or if we're doing comparative, broad, in the 19th century, you have to sometimes go to Russia to go to the Imperial Archives to discuss some of the things that we wrote about in our earlier research. You cannot do that anymore. You hire a researcher, but it's not the same as actually being there with the documents. It's fraught with political stuff. I mean, of course, you can now go to Western Ukraine, but my university can't fund somebody because it would be dangerous, and we can't take that risk. So those archives are open, but not, from someone in an American university can't really go. So hopefully that's a temporary problem, but it is skewing people's dissertation topics. At some point we just also have to talk about the challenges of getting the next generation jobs and all of that, but maybe that's coming in your question. I don't want to get too dark. Thank you.
I've alluded to this, and earlier. I think that, as I said before, my research and my interests have always been interdisciplinary, but I was always rooted also in culture, literature, film, and that interdisciplinary approach, I think in the early years, was difficult and fell sometimes on deaf ears when it came to that conversation with colleagues in Poland. And I think that has changed, and as I've been in the field, I found colleagues who also work, my book is on basically a study of space, right, of spatial poetics. And I found an entire cohort in Poland who's working on those topics. And that's also crossing borders, because there are many Germanists today working on it, even though scholars in Poland had been working on this a decade ago, right? So those things have changed, but I think that in the 90s, early 2000s, there was still a kind of a really fossilized approach to literary studies and cultural studies to some extent that has now kind of, if I dare say, thawed, and has thought a bit, and those conversations are much more productive.
Yeah, so when thinking about challenges and how, let's say, scholars, because I work in both places, so I'm at Brown and I'm also in Warsaw. Right. So it's very difficult to explain what I actually do here, because it's something, I was a Polonistka when I was doing a BA at Jagiellonian, Polish philology. However, then when I went into doing MA in Russian and Central East European literatures and cultures, it became somewhat blurry. And then when I did PhD Slavic studies, then it seems like, oh, okay, so you are like Slavistka, therefore like you speak Russian, Ukrainian. No, but I am like the Polish person. So you're Polonistka. Not exactly. And I think it has to do with the fact that I think we keep coming back to the same idea of Polish studies being very broad things. Like if we want to have it in place, we have to cover and like reach out to different disciplines instead of, let's say, focusing. If I were maybe in Poland, let's say I would be a scholar on Smarzowski film, right? So it would be very, very narrow. I think it's limiting in a sense that, so I think it comes also with this like being very protective of what is Polish. So it's like so I am from Poland, so therefore I have the credibility to do in-depth analysis of a Polish culture. That's fine. However, there is lack of openness towards like this very broader perspective. So if you do something like if you reach out to too many disciplines, it means you don't know how to do one thing very well, right? Which may be true, but for example, what I really loved about film studies department in the United States is how they show the openness towards bringing that Slavic or Polish component to their debate about film. So for example, once I was asked to do, from the film department, to do the course on like, could you teach a theory class, like, you know, implementing like the classical text on film theory, but using the examples from like Polish cinema, Soviet film. And I said like, wow, this is like really incredible way of thinking, of trying really to bring whatever achievement we have with like Soviet montage or the Polish film school into the conversation of, you know, let's say classical Hollywood cinema. So that's what I think is very valuable in terms of like thinking comparatively about something and how the new perspective, being Polish perspective, can bring something into our thinking of classical film theory, whereas where I am in Poland, it doesn't necessarily always work like that. I think it's changing, but people, it's almost like they ask you to say, okay, so you're a Vaida scholar. No, I'm not a Vaida scholar. Like, he's just one of the elements in the game, on the board, but not really. So I think this is the difference, like seeing the big picture versus like really narrowly focusing on something, on one little element of the Polish studies.
Well, we have about 10 minutes left, and I want to see if there are any questions from the floor. We have a microphone put up over there. If anyone has any questions about the future, about the past, about the past or present. And I guess we could talk about the future if we want to get depressed.
I think the future is bright.
Well, why don't you elaborate on that while people are thinking of if they have any questions? You think the future is bright?
No, but I think like the common...
You think the future is bright?
But no, because I keep always thinking about like what we do. So you are part of like the history department. So I think there is no so much pressure, I would use that word, to like having sure that we have like X number of students, let's say take Polish literature, Polish language, etc. So this is something that we probably always had to like come to terms with. But I think it's never been a problem. Like it's always been a problem, actually, and we should stop thinking in terms of administratively, like, okay, so we have to have each year like 10 students taking introductory Polish, because I think it's more important to think in terms of quality. So how many of these 10 students end up doing a major in Slavic studies? I think the quality is something that we should look for, rather than like trying to attract sometimes very random people to take Polish language, for example. So I think the challenge, especially for language departments, is that there is the pressure from administration to have the numbers, but on the other hand, we should finally embrace the idea that our strength is the fact that we will never be like this big giant theme. We will never compare with Russian studies, with Germanic studies, etc. And we should embrace it because that's our strength, and that's why we are able to build these nice communities, right? Even thinking about, Copernicus program or Ann Arbor Polish Film Festival that I always, since I got here, I was involved with. this really makes it a vibrant field for meeting, exchanges, etc. So I think there is not. I think the future will be dark in terms of like the pressure on the numbers and the students enrolled, etc. So we have to start thinking in terms of the quality rather than the quality rather than quantity to really like.
Ron.
Because.
So I think I'm loud enough.
Yeah.
You're fine, Ron.
You're not going to be on the recording,
Oh, okay.
so we're going to bring it to you.
Oh, what service,
That's
thank
the
you.
Copernicus service.
Yeah. Thank you so much, this was really interesting, and I'm so proud of Michigan that it was here that this was so heavily and successfully developed. But you know, I come from the other place, shall we mention? I come from Russia and the Soviet Union, and I worry about the future of our field, including Polish studies, given current politics and the way Russia did a horrific thing last year, and it's going on, and we're involved with war crimes and all the other things. So it's going to affect the way we see things. And I can't imagine doing Polish history, or in my case, Armenian or Georgian or Azerbaijani history without Russia in some sense. You've got to deal with that. Even after the two empires fell, there's this relationship is key. And so I'd love to know what you guys think about how this will develop, you know, or has developed, if you don't want to talk about the future, the relationship with Russia, the negativity toward Russia, which will only increase in the near future, will also affect the study of Poland.
I mean, I know when I started out, if you were doing Polish studies, the obvious other language you would take was Russian.
Until a certain point. And then I think that changed.
And then that changed, because that's definitely not true anymore for history. Yeah, it's more German now, but what do you
Yiddish, even. Yiddish, Ukrainian.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say something provocative for a Slavist, maybe. I don't know. I think this is a moment where Slavic studies can be, to some extent, decolonized. And I think that's good for Slavic studies. And I'm saying Slavic studies now, not Polish studies, right? Not to the detriment of our Russian colleagues who are studying and researching, but to the benefit of expanding into Ukrainian studies and into other parts of the former Soviet Union that are not central and Moscow centered, right? This is somewhat, I know it's a discomforting statement to make, but I do think that it is important not structurally to change, but somewhat in our thinking to change. The primacy of Russian studies came in the wake of World War II, because we did not have enough area study specialists during the war. We did not in the United States have German speakers. We didn't have Russian speakers. We didn't have speakers of these languages. And the investment went there, right? As we look at geopolitics today, that is changing. And we need people who, and the investment needs to be spread a little bit more broadly, right? So I will stop there, but that is my somewhat potentially provocative response to your question.
Can I add something to response to Ron's question? It seems to me that we can and we will continue to collaborate with Russian colleagues, especially those who have left, right? So there's a tremendous diaspora of Russian intellectuals and academics who are living all over the world, Georgia, Armenia, everywhere. And they and we have sometimes the ability to collaborate on issues of post-imperial studies, or I mean, there's ways that there are synergies and comparisons between Polish space and the Russian, Soviet, and post-Soviet space that can be very productive, and we could take advantage of these people being outside of Russia to work closely with them. The dynamic of us in the West interacting with scholars who remain inside of Russia will, I think, continue to be a challenge. I don't know what you have faced, but that has all sorts of fraught dynamics to it. So that maybe is a question mark. But I just wanted to point out that there are ways that we can collaborate, and it's partially because of the location and the common interests of some of those people.
Your question? Thurnau.
It is actually rocket science.
My husband isn't here, so. Okay, so this is a follow-up question here, and also a follow-up to your provocative statement. So do you envision a shift that is in that decolonization from Russia, a shift towards Western Europe, which seems natural after the EU?
Anyone else want to take that? I mean, I do think, as I said, I mean, I think there has been a shift, from a Polish studies perspective, I should also add that Polish studies in its own way needs to be decolonized, right? Yeah. So it's not just an issue of Slavic or Moscow Center, but then we also have the issue of Warsaw-centered history, right? And so centers shift, or I'm going to say centers float, right? And they, and I think that the center will float to some extent west, perhaps. But I think if we continue to maintain a broader perspective of the region, I think it will be healthier for all of the research in that space, right? And that includes whatever that Western Europe is, right? And to maintain the reason I think that Michigan has I'm going to say the word produced so many really productive scholars, professionals, is because there are many language offerings. And they are not hyper-centered in some kind of cultural, political, center-periphery relationship, right? Even though administratively, yes, there are always difficulties with funding, with enrollments, but nevertheless, it provides students with a broad background and the options to do multiple languages, cross disciplines, right? That's a non-answer, but that's the best I can do.
I guess you get the last word, because we have now reached 5:15. So.
And she keeps a tight ship.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for this fabulous panel. Thank you, Brian, for moderating. And